Hello, this is Dr. Hollisa Alewine. Welcome back to our study in Workbook 2 of the Creation Gospel, which is the 7 Abominations of the Wicked Lamp. And we will continue. We've covered the 7 abominations. We're working our way into the 7 seals, and then we'll work our way through the 7 trumpets, the 7 bowls, the 7 thunders. And that's the sum of everything when we're reading the book of Revelation. If you don't get that it's about Shabbat, and Shabbat really is the axis of everything that you're reading in the book of Revelation, then we have to go back to the beginning of creation and look at the number 7. We need to go back to the beginning to understand the end. And this is why Shabbat observance is so important to the believer, because it's a testimony of who the Creator is. It's a testimony that Elohim created the earth, and even He rested on Shabbat. And so when we keep the Shabbat, it's said that it's a remembrance of the work of creation. We're proclaiming the King of the universe, the King of our creation, every time that we observe the Shabbat. And so if we don't know how to observe the Shabbat, we're at a disadvantage, since that's what the book of Revelation is focused upon. As the judgments come in 7s, what we're going to realize that it's focused around those who do know the Shabbat and everything that is associated with that covenant, and those who don't. But it seems like the ones who are most in jeopardy in the book of Revelation are those who do have some understanding and nevertheless are very casual and stagnant in their attitude to it. So Revelation it begins more as a wake-up call to the believer who is behaving casually with the commandments, and especially behaving casually with the feasts and Shabbat. So if you'll remember, when we did the study in Workbook 1, we concluded our 4th section there was the 7 assemblies of Revelation. We layered the lessons. We started with the 7 days of creation, then we overlaid the 7 spirits of Adonai from Isaiah 11, then we added the fundamentals of the 7 feasts so that we could see how all 3 of those were relative to one another. And this kind of is the icing on the cake. We took the 7 assemblies of Revelation and we worked our way through there, and you could see plainly how each of those 7 assemblies carried themes and understandings that are associated with a specific feast, such as Ephesus and the Passover. 2 of those assemblies, if you can remember from Workbook 1, or just remember from reading the book of Revelation, in those addresses and warnings to the 7 assemblies, 2 of those were warned very specifically about something. And that's going to be the assembly of Sardis, which means red ones, and Laodicea, which means justice of the peoples. Those 2 assemblies were warned concerning garments. Garments. In the last lesson, we looked at how important it is not just to prepare the house, but to prepare yourself for Shabbat, so that it's plain to see when those 2 angels come to do their inspection on a Rev Shabbat, and they look around and they see the house in preparation, they look at the family, they see the family has prepared, their garments are upgraded for the Shabbat, they're set apart from the work week. When we get to the assemblies of Sardis and Laodicea, then this warning concerning the garments makes a whole lot of sense, because again, we're dealing with a total of 7 assemblies. The components, we can view them also as a whole. We don't have to view them as separate feasts. In fact, you could really take all 7 and just find Passover themes in all 7 of them. Why is that? Remember, this might be 7 branches, but it was originally 1 piece of beaten gold. And so even though there are 7 manifestations of the menorah, in the end, it's just one Holy Spirit. This really is one thing. There's just 7 different ways of expressing this thing. If you take the 7 assemblies of Revelation, you can find elements of Passover in each one of them, because remember, they're one. And I know that would, to our mindset, that drives us crazy. We want things to be either true or false. A, B, C, D, and fill in the blank. Scripture's never that easy. It asks us to think. And we're told his ways are higher than ours. His thoughts are so much higher than ours. But little by little, he allows us to discover what it means to tap into those high thoughts, and how many things really can just be one thing. And so to single out Sardis and Laodicea on account of their garments makes perfect sense. If these things apply to Sardis and Laodicea, then they would also apply to every one of the other 7 assemblies. Those garments are important in preparation. We can look at them as preparation for the Sabbath. The weekly Sabbath, we tend to dress up for the weekly Sabbath, and we also dress up for the special Moedim, the special high Sabbaths of the year. We dress up at the Feast of Trumpets. We dress up, or we'll dress in white at Yom Kippur. We'll wear those nicer clothes for the feasts. And so whether you're dressing up in your garments for the feasts, or whether you're just dressing up for the weekly Shabbat, there's an important spiritual principle that is embedded there. And to figure out what that spiritual principle is, sometimes it helps to go back again to rabbinic expectation or tradition that sometimes clarifies what we're doing, or even why we're doing it, the rationale behind it. And as it concerns your garments, there is a rabbi named Hananiah, and he taught that one should examine one's garments on the Sabbath eve before nightfall, what we would call a Rev Shabbat. And then another rabbi observed, Rav Yosef said, this is a great law for the Sabbath. And they're speaking here of Jewish law. They're speaking of the community law. Might say it's minchag. It's how the local Jewish community as a group would approach Shabbat. And so it came to be part of their observance that as Shabbat is coming in, before the Shabbat does come in, they will examine their garments, and in many cases very meticulously. They will check their garments. And what are they looking for? Are they just checking to make sure that they're clean, or that there's no tears in them, or what exactly are they looking for? Well, they're looking for something very specific. If you'll remember, there is a Torah prohibition against bearing burdens on Shabbat. Bearing burdens on Shabbat. Now, what are the odds that if you have a garment that you might have left something in the pocket? Especially if it's a special garment. Maybe you have a special sweater or something that you wear on Shabbat, and maybe you slip something down there in that sweater. One thing you don't want to do is carry a burden around on your Shabbat. Now you might say, well, I'm not that worried. If I left something in my pocket on Shabbat, I'm not going to worry about it. That's not really a burden. Fine, but we're looking at the principle of Rabbi Hananiah. He's speaking about Jewish law that would prevent someone from inadvertently leaving a burden in his or her pocket on Shabbat, so that they end up having pretty much just to carry it around in the pocket. And the general principle, or the point that they're trying to make here, it's not necessarily that you might have left a stick of chewing gum in your pocket, and that's too great a burden to bear on Shabbat. That's not really the point of this particular law. The point of this law is that pockets conceal objects. It's less about the obvious, bearing a burden on Shabbat, and it's more about what the pocket could conceal. And so if it's part of your outer garment, let's say it's that sweater, it could be concealing a hidden thing that you, the wearer, and it could be consciously, it might be unconsciously, but somehow you have concealed an object in your pocket that doesn't really belong to Shabbat. It belongs to the 6 days of the secular week. It belongs to the 6 days of the secular world. We all understand that, we see 6 millennia, and then we see a 7th millennium that is going to be part of the kingdom of Messiah. It's going to be that Sabbath 1,000 years, the time that is all Shabbat. And so there's certain burdens that we have carried in these 6,000 secular years that we don't need to carry over into the 7th millennium. This is going to be a glorious kingdom, and we don't want to conceal anything. We don't want to burden ourselves with anything of this secular world that would somehow burden us down on that day that is all Shabbat, when Messiah is the king and everything is open. The evil inclination, it would be bound for 1,000 years. And so everything that has seemed so hard up until now to work in the kingdom, up until now, it is work. It's very hard. There's obstacles, there's battles, there's things to overcome, there's adversity on every side, there's people trying to trip us up, there's people trying to confuse us, there's people making fun of us. And so you can accumulate a lot of things in your pockets on the 6 days of the week. But you want to empty those pockets, you want to empty yourself of those burdens before Shabbat sets in. You want to empty yourself of those burdens before the kingdom of Messiah, that Shabbat kingdom, sets in. And so as the Shabbat draws down upon us, the physical picture is, okay, check your garments, check your pockets. What's in your pockets right now? Reach around in there. Check, in the corners. You know how stuff kind of gets stuck down in the corner and you don't know what's in there, and you thought you searched your pocket, and then you come back later and it was there the whole time. It just kind of got wedged in there. You didn't search hard enough or long enough. And so the principle here is search your pockets. Turn them inside out if you can. Sometimes there's no telling what'll fall out if you turn them inside out. But don't carry, either consciously or unconsciously, the things of this world, of this secular world, that really have no place in the peace of Shabbat, that have no place in the holiness of Shabbat. You want to work for Messiah completely unencumbered in his kingdom, in his millennium, when he rules and reigns. And so that's why you check your garment. You want to make sure that you're not holding resentment, that you're not holding sin, that you're just not holding things of the 6 days of the week so closely that you're not willing to leave them in the natural world, that you're not willing to leave them in the secular world, that you're not trying to drag the activities and the worries and the burdens and the obligations, even the sports. We'll even add that in there, the fun things that you do. They might be fun, but maybe they don't really have a place in Shabbat. They have a role, it's just not here. And so the rabbis are saying, check your pockets. Check those concealed places of your life. Check those nooks and crannies before the Shabbat sets in. It's not really about pockets. It's about us and the things that we do try to drag into Shabbat that really have no business I don't know if that's a play on word, a pun, or what. We don't do business on Shabbat. Well, there's things that have no business in our Shabbat. It's a burden. It's something that we shouldn't have carried in there. It should have been released. And so those two assemblies, Sardis and Laodicea, are told to check their garments. There are things that they are holding on to of this world that have no business in the kingdom to come. They have no business in the kingdom of Messiah. And so with Shabbat, what we get is all that work we did do, all those burdens we did bear on the 6 days of the week, those physical creations that we have made, and that's really what we do through the 6 days of the week. We're just creating. We take what we have and we try to augment it. We try to build on it. We try to improve it. We try to add to it. And so that physical creation, you do carry it into Shabbat, but you don't add to it. You don't allow that to become a burden. Instead, you rest in what you have created. You know, and you can use the food as an example. You don't start cooking at sundown on Friday. You eat the food that you have already prepared at sundown on Friday. And you continue to eat it until sundown on Shabbat, on Saturday. And so it's not that you can't enjoy the physical creation. You absolutely can. You should. It's part of the commandment. You're supposed to take pleasure, oneg, in Shabbat. So it's not like you're saying, oh, the physical natural world has no place in Shabbat. It does have a place. It has a resting place. And so if we understood the difference between the secular work week and that every day of the secular work week is our preparation for Shabbat. In fact, in the temple, on the first day of the week, on Sunday, the priest would say, this is the first day of Shabbat. And then on Monday, they would say, this is the second day of Shabbat, and so forth until they reached Shabbat. They saw Shabbat really as the culmination of the 6 days of the week, because you really couldn't have the Shabbat if you hadn't worked on the 6 previous days. You work on those 6 days and then you rest in whatever has been created. It's not the time to start something new. And so you suspend the progress of that natural work on the 6th day. And instead of building or creating more things, as you did on the 6 days of the week, now the Shabbat will take those things that you have built, that you have prepared, that you have created, that you have crafted, that you have cooked, and now you will enjoy those things to His service, and you will thank Him. And so it's pretty much just an order of authority. It's a recognizing of a boundary line. And so when you keep the Shabbat, when you suspend your creative work on Shabbat, what you'll see is that you're falling under the order of authority, which, by the way, was the message to the assembly of Thyatira. The message there was about levels of authority. And a person who can submit to Shabbat, we might read into that that person has probably got his affairs in order in other areas as well. Shabbat's kind of like our evidence. It's the assessment, it's the report card of what's been going on up until that time. And so as we look at the home, as we look at the preparation for Shabbat, we know that the 7th spirit of Adonai, it was Yirat Adonai, or the reverence of Adonai, the respect of Adonai. That reverence, that respect that we have that's associated with the 7th day, the day of Shabbat, what it's doing is subjecting those lower animal instincts of the nephesh, of the soul, and the flesh, the body, to that of the Spirit. It's subjecting it to when it can subject itself, when the body can subject itself to the Spirit, then it's easier to see holiness. When the nefesh is running the soul, it's going to be hit or miss. But when the soul is in subjection to the Spirit, that pictures to us what the Sabbath day is all about and what the kingdom of Messiah is all about. He will bind the evil inclination. We might call him Satan. He will bind that part of us that wants to rebel against the Spirit. And so we want to do that creative work before Messiah arrives. We want to prepare our souls to live under the authority of the Spirit before Messiah arrives. And Shabbat helps us in that process, because the 6 days of the week have to be subject to the seventh. That work has to be suspended. And so if those witnesses, if those two angels come in and they look around the house and they see that the family has taken the things of the soul, the pleasure of food, the clean clothing, the way that they're using their time, if they see that these things have been submitted in obedience to the Spirit, then all that can come out of that is a good witness. All that can come out of that is that blessing, may it be so next Shabbat. Because this family is understanding how to bring order and peace between the creative physical world and the spiritual world. There is an established order of the Word, and this family understands it. And so every little family on Shabbat, you're like a little Passover family in Egypt. You've received a commandment. You know what to do. They submitted themselves to the spiritual authority of Moses, which is a metaphor for the Torah. They put the blood on the doorpost. They've taken the lamb. They've not a lot of instructions on Passover, but there were a few, and they've obeyed them. And so you're just like that Passover family. You have the instructions of Shabbat. You've submitted yourself to the authority of the Torah, and now you are submitting your physical goods, your physical desires, to that spiritual authority of the Lord's day. And so if you're submitting your life to the Lord's day, then I don't think you have much to worry about when the great and terrible day of the Lord comes. You're prepared. You already understand spiritual authority. And so another rabbi, his name is Kook, and he was a chief rabbi in Israel around the turn of the century. And he was there at a time when not a lot of Jews were that motivated to return to the land. They were thinking they should sit around and wait for Messiah to come, and then Messiah would take them home. But others had the idea that we have to prepare the way. If we prepare the way, then Messiah will come. And of course, Rabbi Kook was of the opinion, we prepare the way. We make the way straight, and then Messiah will come. And so he elaborated on this, what he calls the great law of Shabbat, which is to check your garments. Before Shabbat comes in, check the clothes you're wearing. And it's a deep spiritual principle, like what is concealed on these garments? What do I need to check on these garments before Shabbat comes in? But Rabbi Kook explained it according to the meaning of the word for garment. And the Hebrew word for garment or clothing is beged. Beged. It comes from a root word, bagad. Bagad. Bagad, the verb, means to betray. To betray. So, what do clothes do? Well, they hide you for one thing, but they can hide other things, just like the pocket. What does a pocket do? It conceals things. We think of them as like little extra carrying conveniences, but they can conceal things. You can stick things in there and people don't know you have them. So the garment, the beged, can be a means of betraying someone, because the clothes themselves can be what hide and betray who you really are and what your true intent is. And so on Shabbat, we don't want that to happen. We want who we are on the inside to be exactly the same as what we portray on the outside. If there is a sanctity of the Shabbat day, of the Sabbath day, then there should also be a matching sanctity inside ourselves. We shouldn't be putting on clothes of the Shabbat merely to conceal the fact that we are not holy. We are not sanctified. We are not purified inside. We can put on nice clothes and people will think everything's okay inside, which goes back to the message of the scroll. It is the same thing written on the inside of the scroll as what's written on the outside. That's the message of the garment. It's the same thing beneath your garment as what your garment is telling me is under there. If I see a beautiful garment for Shabbat, I might assume that you have a beautiful spirit. And if I see dirty clothes on Shabbat, I might assume that you have not a dirty spirit so much as just like not careful. But the clothes might betray the actual person. And so because of this, there are certain activities that are prohibited on the Sabbath day. You want to be very modest in your appearance on the Sabbath day, not just all dressed up to meet the king, but you also want to be modest. You don't want to draw undue attention to yourself. In other words, you don't want to dress to the point that people can only look at you, but they can't really see the Father in you. They can't really see Yeshua in you. All they see is the beautiful garment. And it can be deceiving because what's inside that beautiful garment may not be so beautiful. In fact, wearing beautiful garments can simply be a distraction to move the attention away from the reverence of Adonai and Him being the focus of our day, and instead it retrains people's eyes, it's called the evil eye. It moves people's eyes from where they should be, and it focuses on us. And that's the danger of immodest clothing at any time. If we're dressing in order to attract undue attention, which is different than just dressing nice, being neat, maintaining the temple in a beautiful way, there are certain ways that we can dress that draw the wrong kind of attention, that would arouse envy, that would arouse sexual lust, that would arouse vain imaginations. And you say, well, how will I know? You probably do. You probably do. That's where having a very honest friend or relative can come in. And if you're not sure about your garment, whether it might be provoking the wrong response, instead of somebody seeing you as the person dressed and ready to go for Shabbat, you're ready to engage the day of the king. Instead, you have dressed to the point where you are the king or you are the queen. There's a huge difference there. And so we do wear special clothing in honor of Shabbat, but make sure that in that clothing, what it's drawing attention to is the holiness of Shabbat, that it's bringing a spirit of peace into Shabbat, a spirit of harmony into Shabbat. And in that process, we can use our outer life to reflect the peace within.